Welcome. I am delighted to welcome the Secretary General of the United Nations, Mr. Ban Ki-moon, to Stockholm here today. You're more than welcome. Bad news tends to dominate today's political agenda, and that is probably as true in the UN as anywhere else, and it's quite normal. The United Nations was created to address the immense problems of war and poverty, and UN has been for a long time and still is the world's most important platform for international peace and security. And despite difficult times, I am encouraged and also impressed by what the UN has achieved under the leadership of Mr. Ban Ki-moon. Last year, 3 unique global agreements were reached, and I'm referring to, of course, the summit in Addis Ababa on financing development, the new Agenda 2030 for global sustainable development, and also the Paris Agreement on climate change. These achievements give us reason for hope and optimism. It shows what the UN actually can create and is capable of. And that is also the context for my government's increased engagement within the UN. Sweden is a true partner to the United Nations, which also means that we are deeply engaged in discussions about the development of our common organization. We want a UN that can change, learn, and become better, because we all around the world, we need a UN that is effective, legitimate, and strong. The Secretary General and I have discussed and talked about the need for an asylum and refugee policy built on solidarity. We need that in Europe and elsewhere. More of the nations need to do more to help people in distress and also to safeguard the human right to seek asylum. So there is clearly a role for the UN also here. The conflict in Syria needs to be brought to an end, and this can only be achieved by political means. The Secretary General and I also agreed that Syrian women must have an increased influence in the peace talks. Sweden has taken a lead in enabling this through support to Syrian women's organizations. Sweden is also helping to tackle the underlying factors that cause people to flee, including from Syria, through our support to the UN system. Another topic that is being discussed and will be discussed later this evening at dinner is the 2030 agenda, because this is a very important opportunity to make the world more sustainable, more gender equal, and equitable. So Sweden will also try to show leadership in this perspective. As one example, we have set the goal of becoming the world's first fossil-free welfare country. Very soon, the Secretary General will hold the annual lecture in memory of Dag Hammarskjöld, and in his book, Markings, Dag Hammarskjöld wrote this: "Only he who keeps his eyes fixed on the far horizon will find the right road." And both of us want to keep working in that very spirit and intensify our common efforts for sustainable peace. Please, Mr. Secretary General.
Thank you very much, Mr. Prime Minister, for your warm hospitality and welcome. It's a great honor and pleasure for me to visit this great country, Sweden. And good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen of the media. God dag. I'm grateful again for your leadership in addressing many challenging issues this world is facing, including refugees and migrations, which are sweeping this European politics. Most of all, the most important purpose of my visit to Sweden is to express my own, as well as the United Nations, deepest admiration and thanks to all what Swedish government and people are doing for common good, peace and development and security and human rights. Sweden is an exemplary model country in many aspects of the United Nations principles. Sweden is a trusted and indispensable partner of the United Nations across the global agenda, as I said, from sustainable development, climate change, humanitarian action, human rights, peacekeeping, peace building, and conflict prevention, and gender empowerment. Sweden's feminist foreign policy is helping to empower women and girls, one of the keys to future prosperity and security around the world. And we discussed how we can involve Syrian women. He was very much strong on this point, and I told him that I'm conscious, I will take note, and I will do my best. Sweden is also helping us to reflect on how to strengthen our work and modernize the United Nations. Prime Minister Lofven and I have had such a very constructive meetings. We discussed the challenges posed by the largest scale of movement of refugees and migrants in Europe. I continue to call for more countries to join Sweden in resettling refugees and sharing what is a global responsibility. Prime Minister Lofven and I also agreed on the need to speak out against discrimination faced by refugees and migrants. To strengthen global efforts to address this challenge, the United Nations will convene a high-level meeting on September 19th in New York. And I'm grateful for your confirmation of your participation in this meeting. It is essential to address root causes, and the central one is working for peace and addressing the situation in Syria and Iraq, including efforts to counter Daesh, ISIL. I'm encouraged that the cessation of hostilities is holding by and large. We must strive now for a nationwide ceasefire and progress in the talks which will resume next week. Implementation of the new Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs, is also vital. I'm encouraged by Sweden's efforts, led by Prime Minister, to ensure that we hit the ground running. That is further boosted by Her Royal Highness Crown Princess Victoria. I'm very pleased and grateful that she has agreed to be one of Sustainable Development Goals global advocates. The Prime Minister and I also exchanged views on this World Humanitarian Summit to be held in Istanbul on May 23rd and 24th. This will be a major opportunity to agree on new ways of providing assistance, protecting people, and building resilient societies. Finally, we discussed the work we are doing to reform and modernize the United Nations. An effective, accountable, and transparent organization is crucial in helping member states and people meet the challenges of our time. We discussed how United Nations should work upholding this fit for a purpose. In closing, let me say that I'm honored to have been invited to deliver this annual Dag Hammarskjöld lecture, and I look forward to joining many Swedes in historic City Hall in just a short while. Dag Hammarskjöld set the standard for principled leadership and global citizenship. He remains a hero for all of us, a 20th century giant whose example can help us address the serious challenges of the 21st century. Thank you. Tack så mycket.
A question from Swedish Public Television, Secretary General. You yourself and UNHCR have had concern, worries about the deal between European Union and Turkey about sending back refugees from Greece to Turkey. What do you say today? Is this in accordance with United Nations rules and conventions and on asylum? And secondly, a question important for many Swedes. What is your comment on the treatment on the whistleblower Anders Kompass in your Geneva office, a Swedish citizen UN employee who warned about sexual abuse among UN peacekeeping troops?
On first question, this morning in Geneva, I opened, together with High Commissioner for Refugees, Filippo Grandi, a high-level ministerial meeting on what we termed it the Resettlement Plus. We deeply appreciate many European leaders who have been, despite the very difficult political, social, economic challenges, they have been showing great compassionate leadership. Sweden, under the leadership of Prime Minister Lofven, is by per capita ratio the largest and biggest country accommodating refugees. Now about this EU-Turkey agreement, I think it is clear that we need to be speaking solutions based on shared responsibility. I've been calling for countries to work together in a spirit of shared responsibility. The key to this agreement is implementation, how this will be implemented. Of course, the High Commissioner for Refugees has expressed a certain concern about some processes in Greece, detention or other detailed issues, but by and large, we are very much appreciative of such kind of political efforts to address this issue. This is not only a European issue. This has become a global issue. What I'm asking and calling for all the leaders of Europe and elsewhere to show their compassion and their generosity for those people who otherwise would be defenseless and voiceless and whose life will be threatened. Therefore, it is important not to reject them, not to scapegoat them, and provide life-saving support. And one of the good ways to expand the capacity is that to expand some normal pathways so that migrants and or refugees, particularly refugees who are fleeing their homes because of persecution, because of imminent danger for their security, so that they can be accommodated. So, as I said in September, we are going to discuss at a global level. I thank you very much. About this second question, as you know, I established a high-level independent panel led by very esteemed former Canadian Supreme Court Judge Mary Deschamps. She and her panel members presented recommendation, and I have accepted and reported to the General Assembly and have taken, according to these recommendations, necessary administrative matters. When it comes to sexual violence, United Nations and myself as a Secretary General takes zero tolerance policies. I am very much sorry for all these continuing allegations. Even one single allegation is too important, too serious. I'll make sure that whatever allegations comes, we will make sure that this will be investigated, and we will take care for the victims' well-being and support. I have established a special trust fund to help victims or families of those affected persons. Human rights and human dignity is #1 priority, and I launched these human rights upfront policies. Yeah, thank you.
This last question.
Carl Ritter from the Associated Press. Mrs. Secretary General, there's a signing ceremony in New York on April 22nd for the Paris Climate Agreement. I was wondering if you could give us an update about how many heads of state and government are expected to attend, and also what you expect from them besides signing the agreement. Are you expecting them to update their climate plans, perhaps even improve on what they committed to before the agreement?
As Prime Minister said last year, world leaders have shown their great visions and commitment for global prosperity and well-being for the people for whom they serve and for work. The climate change agreement in Paris was one of good examples and good visions. Now, on April 22nd, my ambition is that as many parties as possible come to New York and sign this agreement. Normally, when an agreement or treaty is open for signature, sometimes it takes years to get all the parties signed. Our ambition is that to get it done in one day so that we will immediately enter into ratification process. Ratification process will be given 5 years, but our ambition is that to make this Paris Agreement come into effect as soon as possible. I'm getting already a lot of heads of state and government's confirmation. And this will be, I think, one of the most important occasions. First of all, to raise awareness on the importance of implementing this one. And I'm asking the world leaders if they can take already some ratification process through their legislative bodies or domestic procedures, then it will be most welcome. So they can sign and immediately present ratification to me as a depository of this climate change agreement. We will continue to raise awareness. In early May, we are going to have another very important occasion, Climate Action Day in Washington, D.C. in early May. So this will also provide a good opportunity when government leaders, business communities, and civil societies, again, show their strong commitment for early implementation of this climate change agreement. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.